and welcome to another episode of Influence and Growth Mastery. I am extremely thrilled to have with me today S.A. Grant, Boss Uncaged. This gentleman, you're going to find out, is an interesting individual. He is just coming off of a several-day journey to Germany, and I'm going to open this up to let him introduce himself today. S.A., first of all, let me ask you, how was your trip to Germany?
It was definitely an influential trip. I think more so because we're trying to give our kids like life experiences. For us, we traveled, but ideally, the younger you kind of get kids into traveling, the more longevity they'll get from the education, and be more of a collective people versus just being an individual to a particular state or a region.
Yeah, well, I absolutely loved watching your journey, your several days on your trip. And I appreciate you sharing that with your audience on social media. So thank you for that. Go ahead and let's open up the podcast today with sharing who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I mean, that question kind of, there's so many different fragments to it. And I can kind of tell you a short story of like who I became because of my journey to get here, if that makes sense, right? I always thought of the story talking about I grew up with my creative side with a can of spray paint and a marker in a hand in Brooklyn, New York. Graffiti was my creative outlet. And my parents dragged me kicking and screaming down to Atlanta, Georgia, my senior year in high school. So you could imagine going from the north to the south in the senior year of high school. And then shortly after graduation, thing that made logical sense for them was to throw me into a art school. So my first degree was graphic design, and I loved it. But unfortunately, I was the weirdo amongst weirdos. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. So then I would say like a smart dumbass, then I had an opportunity to get another degree. And I went into web design and multimedia, feeding into the other analytical side of my brain. And again, I was the weirdo amongst weirdos. So in both environments, I fit in, but I didn't fit in at all, right? And that's when I realized that I was equally creative and equally analytical. And I was just kind of like, so what am I going to do with these degrees? So I started my first business back in 2000. It was more of like a freelance thing. And I had an opportunity to kind of, wear multiple different titles. But unfortunately, coming right out of college with my second degree, September 11th happened like 2 weeks before. So there was no job opportunities. So the school that I went to hired me as a tech. And that's where I got like my technical know-how with like video and audio and engineering and babysitting kids that were my age. And hence why I quit that job after about 18 months. And during that same time, again, this is kind of like adding on levels to who I am. I had an opportunity to get married, went through a custody battle, went through a divorce, and got awarded primary full custody of my son when he was 4. Today, he's 17. And so all of that kind of happened in those early years. And I was like, okay, so now what am I going to do? Like, I'm going to grow this business, but I'm going to work for people and I'm going to be a full-time dad at the same time. And I started jumping through multiple different disciplines. And I was like, okay, I want to learn more about strategy. So I went and worked for Apple for 6 months, and I learned about their CRM. I learned about the upsells. I learned about their selling models. I learned about PeopleSoft. And then after 6 months, I left that job. Then I had another opportunity to go to Comcast, and I worked there for 90 days, learned the upsell, downsell model. And I was like, this is great. I'm learning everything that I need to grow my business. And then I got a little bit overeager and overzealous. And I was like, I need to learn about money and finances. Then I got my insurance license. And then I was like, I need to learn about leadership and building teams. Started building insurance teams. I was like, I need to learn about the market. Then I got my Series 6. I'm traveling up and down the East Coast. I need to learn about travel. So I became a travel agent. I did all these things collectively at the same time while, doing Boy Scouts, basketball, football with my son. And then unfortunately, after doing that for a long period of time, in 2018, I had a stroke. And that's kind of where the story kind of changes. So I'll kind of stop it there and let you ask some questions so that we kind of lead into what happens after I had a stroke.
Okay, that sounds great. So first of all, I see where you mention, in your bio, you say that there's 3 to 5 words that describe you. In fact, I'm going to look at them here. You say there's 3 to 5 words that describe you. You're a family man, uncaged boss, adrenaline junkie. That's the one I want to point out. I see where the adrenaline junkie comes in. Now, and you can add more to that if you want to, but the other one being a 50-50 creative and analytical. So in fact, I was going to ask you about that. Tell me a little more about that. But now I see where the adrenaline junkie comes in. So, in fact, I love your story. So, one of the things that comes to mind is, and you just mentioned it, you talked about, all of these things that that you've done, where you started, and kind of part of where you are today, I think about all of these things that you've done. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like, way back when you didn't necessarily have a goal of who you wanted to be when you grew up. And maybe you did, and you just had to try all of those things to get there. Mm-hmm. But you had intention, though, with every single thing that you did. You were a driven individual. Mm-hmm. You had a lot of adrenaline, but you were a driven individual. And so it sounds like that, each thing led you something that was greater to the next thing. Mm-hmm. Would that be accurate, or was you just trying to find the right thing that you wanted to end up doing in life?
Well, it kind of goes back to my statement about being the weirdo amongst weirdos. It's like, as I'm older now, I realize that I don't think like a regular person. And I'm not saying like I'm extraordinary. I just like, my brain is just a little bit different. So for me, it was more so like, if I wanted to be an Apple, if I wanted to be IBM, if I wanted to be Amazon or any relative, even close to any one of those companies and corporations, all of these puzzle pieces, from being a system guy to being a sales guy to being understanding travel, understanding the market, all of those are encompassing into a corporation, into an enterprise level. So for me, it was like, I needed to learn all these things. I wanted to get an MBA, but I didn't want to pay for an MBA. So I was learning MBA and getting paid for it as I went through all these different disciplines. So when I step back from it and look at it, okay, I have an MBA plus, and I've done all these different things, and it makes me so versatile that I could jump into different conversations and network with individuals. So it makes me very volatile in that space, in that aspect. So for me, it was definitely very diligent. It was cause and effect. But again, only one person doing all those things, your body was just going to give out.
Mm-hmm. Uniquely different, but with a purpose. Mm-hmm. Love that. Love that. So tell me a little bit about, so you raised your son, mm-hmm. and again, you did all of these things. So you were extremely busy, mm-hmm. but again, different, but you had a purpose. And, to me, you're showing you were going to do something in life.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
100%.
You were going to do something in life, and whether or not you were going to do it for you were going to show somebody you were going to do it. And I'm going somewhere here, mm-hmm. and I'll tell you that in a minute, because you and I have some differences, but some very unique similarities. But you were going to go somewhere. You were going to be driven. And gosh, I have to say, the example that you've lived in front of your son, mm-hmm. and where he must be today, and want to be, like his father. I mean, you've shown him so much throughout his life. How old did you say he was? 17?
17 going to 18 now. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, it's just so amazing. And then, number one, I don't know how you did what you did, but you've proved to the world that you can raise a child. You did all of his sports events. I mean, I've read in your bio all of the things that you did with him and for mm-hmm. him as he's grown up through life. Plus, you did all of your business activities and your learning mm-hmm. while he's growing up. And you did it all in a day. What was your discipline in doing that?
To be frank,
driven?
I was willing to die for it, if that makes sense. You
were willing to die for it. That's where the stroke comes in.
That's where the stroke comes in. So, I mean, it was to the point to where, like you said, it's 24 hours in a day. And this is before I kind of really learned the essence of leadership and how to multiply yourself by hiring the right people and outsourcing it. So I was trying to do everything myself. And I was willing to do 20 hours a day out of 24, 22 hours a day. And you do that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years,
your health
15 years. Your body just kind of breaks down. And not to say like, was I working out? Yeah, I still had time to work out. I was running around and doing things with my kid all the time, but ideally not getting enough sleep and also the stress of juggling all these different things and different disciplines. Prime example, studying for Series 6 and also thinking about, I got to get the kid ready for his scouts or his merit badge or all these different things that were just adding up collectively over a period of time to where my mind was strong enough for it, but my body wasn't.
Wow. So do you have non-negotiables today, that boundaries that you've set? I'm sure you have. I'm sure your health made you set some boundaries today.
Systems. So I like
systems.
That's another things that I just learned, right? I mean, it's kind of like, I wish I knew these things earlier on. Automation, systems. Prime example, like all the content that I post on the internet, like, am I creating this content? Some of them I am, right? So some of them I created before. So it's just like repurposing it and reusing. And that's why podcasting makes it so easy to do that. I could take 1 hour piece of content and make hundreds of pieces of content from that 1 hour block. And then, resource it, article it, make it images, make clips, and hire people to do these different things for me. So again, I'm not burning myself out, but I'm creating way more content and way more value in the last 3 years than I did in those 18 previous years.
Oh, wow. I love that. So you're also an author. You're an author. You just published your 9th book.
Yes.
Talk to us about being an author and some of the books that you've written and how that comes into play into the business world and the podcasting world.
Yeah, I mean, my first generation of books were just more so me kind of playing off of like the dirty wordplay that, like there's books out there like you hear all the time with the F word or the S word in there. And I was talking about business, but not really thinking about where I was versus where I'm going or where I'm going to end up, and not realizing that writing a book about success without being a household name or having a following of people behind you to see your level of success wasn't beneficial. So then I shifted from that and I started to kind of create other books based upon the brand, which got into Trailblazer. And then now I'm more so talking about subject matters. So like my last book is a podcasting book, and it's a smaller book than my original books. It's 50 pages. And essentially it's about using podcasts for lead magnets and for referrals. And it's a part of a series. And again, I'm going to probably do, like 20, 30 books like this in this series. But again, it's a topic that I love, a topic that I'm passionate about. And it definitely proves my success, but it's not talking about the success, if that means sense.
It does. So let's go back. Let me step back just 1 minute, because I want to talk about how the brand came about from Uncaged Trailblazer and how that incorporated into your business. So, because I'm sure that had to do with your health, the stroke, the authoring of the books, your podcasting. So talk to me a little bit about, first of all, how that brand came about.
So, I mean, post-stroke, kind of going back to the story I told you earlier, and I stopped it there intentionally, is that when I woke up in the hospital, my son was there, my parents were there, and my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife right now, was there. And, I was trying to figure out what happened. So they told me I had a stroke. I had to, my face was completely drooped on the right side. I had to work on regaining like the strength in my right hand. I couldn't even like hold a spoon and eat for myself. And my right leg was a lot weaker than my left leg. So I had to kind of work through that. So the first thing I did was in that week in the hospital, I was like, hey, by Friday, that it happened on a Sunday night. It's like, by Friday, I'm going to leave the hospital. That was my first objective. So once I accomplished that, I was like, okay, I'm not limited to what status quo is of saying that you can and you can't do it. And then my girlfriend, who's my wife now, came to me. She was like, so now what are you going to do? It's an opportunity for you to kind of reset and rebuild. And she was like, I think it's time for you to become a brand, time for you to brand yourself the way you've been branding everyone else for the past 18 years. So I took that to heart, obviously married her because it made perfect sense. And then the next 18 months, was the road to recovery. I'm a native New Yorker, so I speak fast. But during that time frame, I spoke like I was from Louisiana or Alabama. I had a slow draw for like 18 months. And then once I got my speech back to where it is right now, I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do next? Like, how am I going to take everything that I've learned and put it into something and also brand myself? And that's when I sat down and I was like, well, I could be a YouTuber or I could be a podcaster. And then I was looking at them and I was like, okay, I'm the guy behind the curtain. I'm not really wanting to be in the limelight. So I took the latter back then, even though I'm doing both now. And I became a YouTuber. It was like my strategies of branding came into play. Like my original company was Cerebral Media, Cerebral Graphics, Cerebral 180. And I was like, the reason why that's not working is because the way it's spelled phonetically, it's a difficult word. It's S in the alphabet. There was so many different negative things about that brand. So I literally sat down and treated myself as my first client to restart. And I built this brand from like the logistics of it. I wanted a name that can fit into like a phone number. I wanted a name that's self-defined. I wanted a name that's catchy. I wanted a name that was someone would raise their eyebrow. I wanted something that was bold, something that was exciting. And that's when I came up with Boss and Cage after doing all these different variables of thinking and processing. And then the name was born and the podcast was born in February 2020.
Wow. Wow. So you also have a growth strategy that you take people through.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how that too fits together with your podcasting. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to paint the picture of everything that you do, and how that can help the audience. So talk to me about the growth strategy. Opportunity that you have.
Strategy is what I realized in my early days that we had a digital marketing agency. That was my Cerebral 360. And so people would, hey, we need a logo. Hey, we need a website. We need all these digital things. But the reality is that people are not really asking the real questions about why they need what they're asking for. They just see John doing it and they want to do it. They see Susan doing it, they want to do it, but they're not really thinking through the processes of what they need, why they need it, how much it's going to cost, and what's the return of investment going to be. So when somebody is referred to me now, because I'm on a bigger scale, I'm not just building logos and websites. That's kind of like the side effect of what we do. Somebody may say, okay, look, SA, I need a shopping cart. So my question is, okay, well, what's your product? Then they tell me the product. And then I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper. Who's the target audience for this product? Like, why are you creating this product? Does this product exist? Is there a market for this product? How much does this product cost? What's your revenue streams? And then I start to ask them the questions to where, like, we're not even talking about the website. We're not even talking about e-com. We're talking about the structure of the business, right? And then once we kind of iron those out through a growth strategy, and I usually use like the business model because it makes it easy to say, okay, your value proposition, your unfair advantage, your customer segments, your channels of communication. These are things that if you cannot identify, then you have no reason to create a website. You have no reason to create anything. And then from that point, they will leave with that report. And now they have opportunity to take this report, but what they need and why they need it, to another agency, or then they could leverage our agency to kind of help them create the content to build that brand and build that structure to the growth.
Yeah, I'm amazed. Oftentimes people don't even realize why they're doing what they're doing. They don't realize even what their values are, their personal values, or even their business values, how those things tie together. So I love that. I love that. So you mentioned too in your bio, and I love this. You say success will come to you if you hunt it down. Talk to me about that.
I mean, it kind of goes back to personality traits, right? I mean, I was kind of the guy behind the curtain, but if I was to be in the military, I was a sniper. If that makes sense, it's like I'm always looking for the target, and I'm always wanting to hit the target, no matter how far or how close I am to it. Like that's my end goal. That's where I'm heading. Period. So I'm not the type of person to say, okay, I'm going to be this or I'm going to do this, and then I just sit down eating bonbons and waiting for it to happen. Like you have to take action. You have to like have discipline behind it. You have to figure out what systems, you have to figure out who do you need to get to that next level. I didn't get to 9 books and into a successful podcast just by sitting down and just letting it be. Every opportunity and iteration of information that came back, we expand and grow because we're taking the feedback and then we're executing it ongoing. Like right now, we're working on rebuilding an entire website for all of our enterprises collectively in one, because it's that time to do that.
Wow, I love that. So what do you love most, SA, about what you do? What gives you joy at the end of the day? And when you lay your head down on the pillow, you're just like, oh, that felt so good today.
It's a split, right? So, I mean, again, my creative brain and my analytical brain. And again, I've learned that I'm equally both. So I have to kind of feed both these monsters. You know, if you think of it from that standpoint, it's kind of like having like the devil and angels on your shoulder. And I keep both of them there equally. So on one hand, it's by the end of the day, having solid interviews with individuals that are highly successful or on the road to success. And that's what the premise of Boss Uncaged podcast is really about, is having opportunities to interview someone that, it's not about how much money they're making, it's about the impact they're making versus
I agree.
talking to someone that may be a multi-billionaire, right? And both of them, there's a lot of similarities, but the only difference is time. Like this person can't become this person very easily if they follow those disciplines and those structures. So that's one side. And the other side is, for me, is just creating stuff, like you said earlier, posting content. Like literally I wake up on average 2 to 3:30 every single morning, and I'll just kind of come up with some ideas, and then I start writing. And I make sure that every single day I'm writing something to keep my brain organized. So I'm always also creating content for my blogs to market and do everything else, maybe a year from now, 2 years from now. But again, I have to constantly keep creating. Otherwise, I feel like I'm stagnant.
I love that. Oh, I love that. Well, and two, you talked about earlier, repurposing old content. I saw something the other day, and I can't remember if it was something I watched on YouTube or if it was something I read in an email that came from one of the promotional emails that I get, but they were talking about taking an old podcast or YouTube that we posted and just changing the title and the description and reposting it, just updating it to see, how many new views that content gets, almost like it's brand new content. And they were it was a case study. And I was amazed, at the new views that particular video, I believe it was a video that somebody had posted. And I was amazed at the new views that video had gotten just by changing the title and the description. And so do you do much of that yourself?
The strategies for that. Actually, I did a video, an education spot for one of my networking groups, and somebody had invited me out. And originally I was saying, okay, how do you take a video podcast and create 13 new pieces of content? And so while I'm doing that and I'm listing out the 13, and, I kind of blacked out. I went from 13 and ended up with like 128 variables to one piece of video to all the pieces of elements of content you can create. So to answer your question, that's what we do, right? I'm still posting content from my season 1, and we're in season 6, and we have a backlog up to season 11. So again, collectively, right? You talk about 6 seasons worth of content. Somebody comes into my circle today, they may see an episode from season 1, episode from season 4, episode from season 6. They may see me do a new live, see me write an article, see a blog post, see a book recommendation. And again, all this content is just compounding and it multiplies. I think I look at it as kind of like the Gary Vee effect. Once you understand what Gary Vee has done, and Gary Vee argues with himself on past videos. He's just creating new content on his old videos and having a debate with himself. Like that's the ultimate goal. You have your own content to where you're posting everything and you don't have to utilize anyone else's content, like sharing from someone else's blog or hiring someone else to write a blog for you. When you have that much content, like you become like that brand, much like Gary Vee.
S.A., correct me if I'm wrong. Did I hear or read, I think I heard, you're like a year out with podcast? Did I make that up?
Oh yeah, you're talking about as far as backlog? Yeah, we're 18 months out right now. So we have 18 months worth of, we just released season 6, episode like 295, and we have a backlog of close to 400 episodes total. So we have about 200 episodes that we have not aired yet.
That is amazing. That is amazing. Yeah, when you sent me your links too, I have to say you were probably, I'm going to brag on you for a minute. You are probably the most organized individual that I've ever had on the podcast. Other podcasters are going to listen to this and say, what? I'm not organized, but other people are organized, but you are probably the most organized individual that I have had on the podcast. Whenever you sent me your links and I opened those up, I was like, one day I want to be just like S.A. I want to be just like you. I was so impressed. So let's talk about, you have a book club. Let's talk about your book club.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, again, like being creative and analytical, it's always trying to like figure out a solution or how to monetize something based upon what you're already creating without creating something new. So that book club and also the book club podcast all stems from the original podcast of Boss Uncaged. So hear me out, right? If I'm interviewing a business owner, one general question that I've asked for at least the past 6 seasons is, on your journey, what books have helped you to become who you are that you would like to recommend for our listener? That's one
Wow.
book, right? I may ask them a second question. Okay, so that's great. That's the books that helped you to get to where you are. What books are you reading now? Okay, that may be 2 books in one episode, right? And then last but not least is 3. Is like, okay, well, you've read all these books. You have a lot of information. What books have you authored? Potentially 3 books. So 3 books per episode. We're closing in on 200 episodes. You times that by roughly, let's say 2, it's 400 books that just kind of come from people that are successful that are recommending. Of course, there's some overlap and some books that other people have said in earlier seasons. But I was like, I have all this additional content that specializes in books that's not 100% driven on a 1-hour podcast. How do I take that nugget and make it its own monster?
Wow.
So we started to make an online directory. We started to plug in all the books, making cover art, promoting the books that were recommended from season 2, episode 5, season 3, episode 6, whatever, and did automation for that. So it's automatically propagating through social media. And then we created the Facebook group, and, like people come in and we make recommendations all the time. But again, all of that came from one podcast, one episode, one question, and scaled it up, which goes back to the growth strategy.
Wow. Wow. That is amazing. That is amazing. I love it. I mean, you've given a tremendous amount of nuggets today. So that kind of comes back to the reach one, teach one. I mean, there's so many ways that you're doing reach one, teach one. I've heard that. I've heard that used in so many different ways, but I wanted to ask you about that too. So when I now get that from you. You also used a quote from John D. Rockefeller. I had rather earn 1% off of 100 people's efforts than 100% off of my own efforts. I love that.
Yeah. And I learned that in my insurance days, right? It's kind of like, building teams, building assets. And that's when I kind of realized that I was doing like my digital marketing business wrong. And if I was to redo that quote right now, it's not even the efforts of multiple people, it's the efforts of multiple systems. Because again, there's always an evolution, right? So back in his day, it was people. Well, now if you add peoples and systems together and automation together, imagine how much more you can get done if I have one system that can do the work of 100 people, and then I have 100 people doing 100 systems. The math does not lie. It adds up really quickly to you can do things at scale, and you can do it at a magnitude that we couldn't even imagine 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a question I've never asked anyone, but from you, because you're such a systems guy, I would love to ask you this question. Do you have a favorite app that you use?
So my question would be, is it a mobile app or is it a desktop app?
It doesn't matter. I just want to know. I'm like, I want to know everything. I want to be inside your brain today.
Yeah. I mean, for like systematic posting as far as automation on social media, we use Pupler and SocialBee. And again, I'm a big supporter of founders, right? So like I find founders through AppSumo. I purchase their deals. Sometimes I interview them. And, another part of my podcasting system that I created is leveraging podcast recruiters or podcast booking agents. So I tell them exactly I'm looking for founders of software companies. So it just makes it to where I'm surrounded in that world all day, every day. So those 2 platforms, and also Hello Wolfie is another one. I think I interviewed the founder of that one, season 1. But those platforms make it so easy for you to plug in. And I always look for platforms that leverage CSV files. So if you're not familiar with CSV files, they're database files that you can export out from Excel. But it makes it so much more easier for you to then build a great quantity of content, export it out, and then import it in. And secondary to that, both those platforms also leverage RSS feeds for any podcaster, YouTuber, Shopify storefront. All of those engines that I just mentioned all have RSS feeds. So if you're not leveraging that, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And by using those RSS feeds, every time you upload a video, every time you upload a new product in the store, every time you upload a new podcast, by default, the RSS feed would then spit that information out to the software, and then that software would then propagate it on the internet to wherever you tell it to.
Wow. Wow. That's gold. That's gold. So what about affiliate marketing? What are your thoughts about affiliate marketing? I've started doing a little bit of that. So just curious your thoughts there.
I think it's a gold mine. I mean, I've been doing affiliate marketing for a period of time, like, with other podcasters, again, other founders of software. I'm working with a company right now and, interview them on the podcast. And like most of the times, like on my onboarding process for my podcast, that's one of the questions that I ask. So I'm like, okay, who are you? Blah, blah, blah. Here's your information, your social media profile. Do you have an affiliate program? So if you're coming on my show and we're going to be talking about your service, it only makes sense that if they have an affiliate program, 9 out of 10 times, they'll put a link, and it may be website.com/BostonCage. I'm going to put that on my show notes anyway. So anyone that's listening to the episode, they click on that show notes, it automatically updates the cookie. Anything that they purchase at that point in time, then I get kickback. It's kind of a no-brainer, right? The book club is the same thing. Well, if I'm sourcing hundreds of books and I'm spending capital to create an online directory to make it easy for business owners to find other recommended books by business owners, well, by default, I just pull that into Amazon affiliate. Every time somebody clicks on something, by default, and people don't realize that cookie lasts for 24 hours. So if you go to my directory and you click on a book, it costs you nothing. Right? You're buying the book, you're getting the education, you're getting the value, and then anything else that you put in your shopper cart in that 24-hour window, I'll also get percentages of that as well.
Oh, wow. See, that part I did not realize, but I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And it goes for software. It goes for anything hardware. I mean, there's so many different affiliate offers out there. I mean, again, I think if more people focus on the affiliates versus trying to get capital, then you can actually make revenue without having to sell anything, if that makes sense. So you can create content all day, and much like an old school blogger, blogs were getting paid because they had all the affiliate links to the product that they were talking about. So they didn't have to sell anything. You just have to click on it and make a purchase if you wanted it.
Wow. Very interesting. I love that. That's another big nugget. Yeah, I've started doing a little bit of that myself. And speaking of AppSumo, I love AppSumo. I have AppSumo has gotten a good share of my money as well. So
it's part of my bottom line budget. So I mean, like literally, my wife, she's originally a treasurer and an accountant. So like literally, we have an item that's just for AppSumo every year that just goes. I'm just like, it only makes sense. Why would I spend, prime example, for MailChimp? And again, I love MailChimp, but why would I spend $60 per month for MailChimp when I could spend $60 one time and get something that's comparable to MailChimp to do what I need to do at scale? And as they grow, I still have a lifetime deal. Whatever I'm doing with them will eventually grow. And if that doesn't work out, there'll be another provider. And all I have to do is hire someone to transfer that content back and forth. So you save a lot of money over time. But again, you're getting access to new platforms like MailChimp was on AppSumo at one time. Zapier was on AppSumo at one time, but most people don't know that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I have been transferring quite a few of my my services over to AppSumo and just continuing other products. So I love that. So SA, anything else that you have created that you would like to mention to the audience today? Or I mean, you've got a business summit coming up. You want to talk about that?
Well, I mean, if I think the business summit you talk about is probably I'm speaking at it, so it's not my personal business summit. Is one that I'm speaking at. So I mean, I speak at multiple different summits throughout the year. I think just kind of like telling the story of like podcasting. I think if anyone is a listener and they understand podcasting, I think the hardest thing to comprehend about podcasting is monetizing it. And the reality is there's so many different ways to monetize it. I can kind of give you different things that we've done. Right. I have a lot of information.
Please do, because
You listening?
I said, please do, because I'm in the process of trying to monetize mine. So go right ahead.
Right. So one is like the directory, right? I mean, obviously the book directory works into my model because I ask people and they tell me the books. So that makes perfect sense. But think about it from your standpoint. If you are on a podcast or you're creating a podcast and you ask a particular question and that particular question has something associated to it. Prime example, if you're food and you're talking about a particular product, then you probably need to find that vendor to then sell that product, right? If it's hardware or something on Amazon, then become an Amazon affiliate. So now you're making money without having to think about it. In addition to that, like with my podcast, because we have so much surplus of episodes, it becomes a supply and demand thing. And our episode is ranked 0.5 globally. We have 10 to 20,000 downloads per month. So it's an attractive podcast for business owners to get on to promote their products. But again, if you get on today, it takes 18 months for the episode to air. Supply and demand means that now there's opportunity. So the opportunity we came up with was, okay, we can expedite your episode. So if you pay us a premium, we can get your episode expedited in a week versus 18 months, which for anyone that's wanting to sell or market their product to our podcast, it makes perfect sense all day, every day, right? Other opportunities is like the academy, like the books go hand in hand with our academy. So we have the Boston Cage Academy that kind of helps people understand what we're doing at scale with all the different disciplines, from digital marketing, from book creation, from automation, creating articles, all the things that you see me doing in this academy. There's pieces and these elements to kind of help people watch videos to get through those processes. That's another way to make money. And again, I could market that through my platform on my podcast, and I don't have to use ads, and I don't have to use Google, and I don't have to, send out emails technically if I don't want to. Right. So I would just say, look at it from that standpoint. Look at your assets, look at them as what value they're giving, and then associate it to something that makes it a no-brainer. And this example would be a directory. A directory is a no-brainer. But imagine, that's one of the things we're going to create next is an online directory, kind of like AppSumo, that leverages all the apps that we've been using at scale to build Boston Cage to where it's at. Well, if we're going to do this online directory, why do we not make all those links, affiliate links to every single one of those platforms? It only makes sense for the listener or the person getting the value. They know that Boston Cage is using it, how they're using it, where they're using it. And then the academy shows them what to do and how to do it. And then if they decide to make a purchase, then we get kickback. So that's 3 different payments, all within a situation to give value without even asking for a payment.
Love it. Yeah, I've already been thinking down that line already. Love it. That is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. So where can people reach out to you, say, if they would like to follow you, join you?
That's a beautiful part about brand recognition, right? So if you go to Google and you type in Boston Cage, I mean, not to sound facetious, but we dominate the top 10
I love
pages.
it.
Like we're on all of them. So, I mean, whether it's an Amazon store, or a podcast episode, a YouTube video, I mean, it's to the point now we even have Boston Cage shoes. We have Boston Cage hats, book bags. Like, again, if it's merchandising. Notebooks. Like we have 32 of them, like literally. So, I mean, they're all there. You just have to type in Boston Cage. And again, it's platform specific as well. So if you go to Amazon and you type in Boston Cage, well, all my books are going to come up. And then you look at the title of my booking conventions, Boston Cage is usually integrated in every single title, right?
Yeah.
So if you go to YouTube, Boston Cage, again, all the platforms, all the social media outlets, you type in Boston Cage, you'll find us.
Yeah. I say you are my hero. I just want you to know that you're my hero. You've not known that, but I read your post. I looked at all of your travel pictures. You have I've not actually quote followed you, but your page has been public, and I have stalked you, even though you've not known I've stalked you. So I aspire you. So just know that, you are an influencer in my mind. And so I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do. And obviously you have a mindset of helping people grow. You give content freely. And I appreciate that about you. And for those of you that are in the audience, definitely go follow him and reach out, do business with him, watch his podcast, watch his YouTubes, and follow him on social media. And if you need his, if you need his services, definitely do business with him. You will not be disappointed. I can promise you that. So, anything in closing that you would like to mention?
I like to close out with like this quote that I came up with years ago, and it goes something like this: "Life is parallel to existence, but perpendicular to time." And I want people to kind of really understand and break that apart. That life continues forever, but there's going to be roadblocks that are going to happen, and you're going to have to conquer each roadblock, whether it's a life and death situation, whether it's a business situation, a hurdle, somebody in your family dying. Keep in mind that life is going to continue moving forward, and you have to find a way to overcome these hurdles over and over again to become your greatest self.
Oh, wow. Love that. That is so good. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like it's such an honor to have you on my podcast and speak to my audience. And for those of you that are here, if you've not already joined my Facebook group, my free Facebook group called Influence and Growth Mastery, please do that. We have several influencers that are in there that are ready to help you grow. And definitely want to meet you there. And until the next podcast next week, I will see you then. Bye.